Joe, thank you. In the studio with us, writer Emma Wolfe and the journalist James Bloodworth for another look at this morning's papers. Good morning again.
Morning.
Shall we start inside The Guardian, Emma? The UK, says the headline, is less ready now for a pandemic than pre-COVID. How can that be the case?
Wow.
Really worrying, actually. This is Dr. Clive Dix. He's head of the Vaccine Task Force, which is one of the not discredited agencies around the whole COVID time. So this guy is respected. He's been telling MPs there's been a complete demise in work preparing us for vaccine readiness. There's been a very, very narrow focus on a small range of vaccines. He says all activity has pretty much stopped. That if we had another pandemic, we simply don't have the range that we need because obviously you don't know what vaccine's going to come up, what antigens are going to develop, all of this. He says there's been incompetent decisions, less resilience and a very narrow range. And I'm really not a fan of vaccines at all. And in fact, I'm, kind of quite anti them all. But I do think this is extremely worrying that we could be facing another pandemic and not be better prepared than we were back in 2019, 2020.
Jane? Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that stood out of me from this is he says what we've seen is a whole list of incompetent decisions, which feels like that's something that's applying across the board at the moment in public life. The vaccine rollout was, Britain was the first country in the world to roll out a COVID vaccine. I mean, we shouldn't forget that. It was a huge success, saved many, many lives, and it seems like those lessons have not been taken on board by the government. And this is not someone who typically comes out to bash the government. This is a highly respected doctor who works with the government.
They seem to be too busy clearing up the mess.
And those same vaccines that we rolled out are not going to work again. I mean, we have, people build up resilience. Things change. Viruses change.
I don't think enough is said, though, and it's good to hear you say that. I do think we should remember that we rolled it out before anybody else. The rest of it was a debacle, you'd hope. But I've total confidence if the Labour Party do get elected that they will tax the non-dom people, and that will pay for pandemic planning for the next 200 years.
James, look at the front page of the Eye.
I know this story will not go away.
The headline here is the Post Office knew the second IT system had faults but prosecuted staff anyway. James, what have we learned?
Story,
yeah, so I mean, we've heard kind of different versions of the story, but the Post Office basically, they knew that this capture computer software was making errors, yet they told the postmasters who were being investigated to their face, they said capture doesn't make mistakes. And this is while people were being hauled over the coals for losses that were being registered on their systems that had nothing to do with them.
So we're not talking about Horizon here. This is a whole second set of processing software. Capture
the one that
IT.
replaced it.
Yeah, it's a second IT system called Capture. But the problems were known about for many years, and a number of faults were experienced, and yet it was just denied to these people who made complaints about it. And it was like computer says no, Capture doesn't make mistakes, is what they kept on saying. This whole story has been shocking, and one of the things I found most shocking about it this week was hearing about the executives, so not just Paula Venables, but all these executives who worked for the Post Office during this debacle. They've all moved on to these high-powered executive jobs, moved on to boardrooms of big companies, and there's been kind of no blowback for them who presided over this whole scandal, and yet you have people whose lives have been completely ruined in some cases.
I think blowback's a really interesting thing. I think, I've said it, and people perhaps don't agree. I think there will be criminal proceedings, and I think a lot of those people will be shaken in their boots. This story is going nowhere, Emma.
Well, let's see, because they now work for private companies, so it may be hard to pursue them. I mean, we were just reading yesterday about people's homes being sort of broken into and people's jewellery being stolen, taken.
Terrible.
It's an absolute. It really is a scandal.
Let's move to the Mirror front page. The Mirror, good job, actually, traced down the doctor in Turkey who performed weight loss surgery on that young lady who died. Grieving mum has called for a ban on cosmetic tourism. He said, I did nothing wrong.
Well, and he does have 20 years' worth of experience operating on people in Turkey. This is Morgan Ribeiro, 20-year-old, who went out to Turkey to have a gastric sleeve fitted with her own trust money. That operation would cost 8,000 to 10,000 in this country, and it cost her 2,500. The Mirror have gone out there and they've tracked him down. He says, I'm very sorry about her death. The mother, as you say, is very, very angry and says, imagine what my daughter went through. This was early January. She was coming back from the flight, on the flight back. She seems to have gone into septic shock and then died a few days later. They're doing an autopsy in this country, and there are investigations going on with Serbian prosecutors and with the British authorities. And this man is saying, you know, we do this all the time. It was completely separate. He says it was to do with an embolism on the flight. But
then what was she doing on a flight so soon after major surgery then?
Exactly, and why hadn't she been checked properly?
But I just think we've done this story so many times and we'll continue to do it, and I think it's right and proper. There has to be a warning, Jay. I understand people want to save money, but these stories are becoming not commonplace, but too regular for people not to sit up and take notice, right?
Yeah, and Turkey, I mean, Istanbul's gone from being kind of the seat of the Ottoman Empire to the place where people go now for Brazilian butt lifts and gastric surgery, and it's... I don't know, you can't really ban it. You can't ban people from getting medical treatment when they go away, but we should be much more explicit about the risks that carries with it, because I feel like a lot of people don't know that getting surgery in Turkey is not the same as getting surgery in the UK.
I'm going to go back to my usual thing. Are we not saying that some of these tech companies online advertising this stuff should insist that these companies are more open and honest about their results and their procedures?
Yeah, but you're dealing with mostly young, or often young people, or often vulnerable people. They're preying on their insecurities. I can fix this, I can fix that. You're overweight, I can fix that. Come out here, we can give you Botox. Look at Katie Price, who's been, you know, very vocal about her own cosmetic surgery. Well, yeah, but you make a joke, but I think that is a very, very mentally unwell woman. And I think, you know, it should be illegal for anyone to keep operating on her.
I think let's just be careful. We can't speak to, you know, exactly the decisions she's made and why she's done that and the state of her mental health.
I was saying what I feel about that is when you see surgeons operating, continuing to operate on people who have, you know...
There is definitely...
so much surgery on their bodies.
So I can talk about it, but I won't. I'll say this. I think you're right that people... We live in a world now that's obsessed with so many different things than they used to be obsessed. But what I find... I'd like a woman's perspective on this, and I mean this I'm going to be as balanced as I can. So many of these people go to so many extremes, and it doesn't look right or normal.
That's what I'm saying.
I find that there has to be
Jeremy,
a reason
that's what I'm saying.
that.
It's a form of mental illness. It's a form of body dysmorphia, and I can say that. I'm not putting that in Katie Price's mouth.
I think what's happening in this case is this woman would like to have had the surgery here, but it was too expensive because it's a cosmetic procedure rather than something the NHS would have paid for.
But then we have a whole debate about that, and people will say, well, why shouldn't she have it here? And other people will say, well, hold on a second, that's cosmetic. You're not going to like what I'm going to say. Change your diet, do some exercise. There's people waiting for heart surgeries who have got cancer, so that's why people go and do it. But I think this danger is everywhere there.
And we had a case study on the programme just last week. It was absolutely galling. This woman who, you know, quite truly, she showed us very transparently what had happened to her body after she flew to Turkey to have some surgery done. And she just said she's now, you know, relieved that she can actually just even spend time with her children. So those are the risks some people are prepared to take, incredibly. Let's move on. In the Times, James, poor show. The richest give half as much to charity. What is going on? There seems to be a sort of a drop in how generous people are prepared to be.
Yeah, so we're seeing a decline in noblesse oblige, which is...
what does that mean?
Noblesse oblige.
Yeah, propensity of rich people to give their money away to charity. So the wealthiest 10% of households donate half as much as a proportion of their income as those in the poorest 10%. And we've seen a decline recently. So the amount raised from top earners has fallen by 20% over the past 7 years, even as their income has gone up. I don't really understand why this has happened. I mean, it doesn't really say in the article. It just kind of speculates. But, yeah, poorer people give more of a percentage of their income to charity.
I would have a view. I'd love to know what you all think about it. I think that charity fatigue, and that's a phrase I've just created, is probably more widespread across the whole of our society because of a cost of living crisis and because people are fed up, seemingly, in their minds, and they perhaps feel they need to help themselves and help people at home more. I could be totally...
But this is the purely the richest who have seen a boost have seen their incomes go up.
Because the Labour Party want to tax every rich person.
I think in general the British public are very, very generous. I think what noblesse oblige refers to is that sense of duty that you're obliged, literally obliged, that if you have a lot of money, you have a moral sense of duty to look after the people on your land. That kind of, you know, the ancient feeling that you look after the serfs, you look after the
peasants are revolting, Your Honour.
The peasants, that's the word. And maybe rich people have sort of lost that connection with the world, the feeling of giving back. But yeah, I mean...
It is very interesting.
We have more billionaires than ever before.
Front page of the Express, brouhaha. I love this. Right, I don't get this.
I mean, we were offered a really salty cup of tea to try out on the show. Genuinely, I don't drink tea and I really don't want salt in my tea, but this is what a US scientist has been saying a little pinch of salt in tea, and the US Embassy have got involved, and they have issued a statement.
We're really
saying,
sorry, England.
It's a hilarious statement, which I'm sure you've all read.
Have we
saying,
got the statement anywhere?
The embassy sought to reassure the good people of the UK the unthinkable notion of adding salt to Britain's national drink is not official US policy, and it never will be. But then they ruin it at the end. They say the US Embassy will continue to make tea in the proper way, by microwaving it.
Oh, it's crazy.
And that's got everybody up in arms, because the idea of microwaving your tea is just so wrong.
Is it sort of, so you put cold water with the tea bag in the microwave and then boil it like that?
I don't even want to think about it.
Let's talk about the best way to make tea very quickly. I know it's boring, but I'm
tea bag, hot water on, and then add the milk?
Empty cup first with hot water to warm the cup. Otherwise, your tea gets cold.
Well, can we talk about pots?
The socialists, the champagne socialists knew that. You've got to warm the cup with boiling water. There's my boy.
In the winter.
Then the tea bag.
I can't even believe you're talking about tea bags. You should be warming the pot.
Yes.
Putting in one extra scoop for the pot. I think that's what you need to do.
Tea leaves, amazing.
Yeah,
what
really
about you?
Better.
Mackerel fishing.
But I would just put tea bag in, water, make sure it's quite strong, and then just a tiny dash of milk.
Oh, you're a builder. You like builder's tea.
Is that how builders have it? I don't know.
But it's definitely the milk after, isn't
builders
it?
Builders have like 6 sugars as well.
The microwave would never feature.
How many sugars do you have?
0.
So
how many do you have?
Half.
Someone gave Jeremy a cup of tea with 1.5 sugars in.
And I went, I didn't like that.
I bet it's sweet. Do you have sweetener or sugar?
Brown sugar, half.
I mean, it still makes more sense than salt.
Yes.
I used to put sugar in. I don't anymore, but it's better than salt.
What about tea bags or tea?
Yorkshire Gold.
I am completely... This is a bromance with James Bloodworth. There's nothing better than Yorkshire Gold.
The postman who drinks Yorkshire Gold. There we go. We're learning so much.
The proposition postman who got bitten by a dog drinks Yorkshire Gold.
Final story, James. Yoga, Pilates and aerobics instructor voting on whether to strike.
Yes, so yoga, aerobics, Pilates instructors voting to go on strike in Colchester. Unison said its members at the Colchester Council have not had a pay rise for almost a decade, and like everyone else, yoga teachers are feeling the pinch with the cost of living crisis.
Sure there's a pun
it's kind of a funny story, but I mean, rates have stayed the same since 2015. 25 quid.
Whoever wrote that's great. Underpaid and overstretched. That's really
there
good.
You go. Hey. I knew there'd be a good one.
Yoga teachers to vote on strike action.
But
what have we come to?
They
in this
say they
country?
haven't had a pay rise for almost a decade.
What? Charge more then?
Yeah, I mean, it is quite.
Go private.
What are the council doing employing yoga and Pilates?
I can absolutely tell you why yoga and Pilates is big in Essex, though. You can work that out, can't you? Eh? The only way is Essex that all at it every morning. They arrive in their Range Rovers. Pilates sort of woman?
Yeah, I like a bit of Pilates. I like a bit of yoga. I like a child's pose.
Pardon?
I was doing the child's pose on the living room floor last night, and it really,
Could
really
you show me what that is?
I can't actually.
Difficult there.
It would be difficult on the floor.
I find Pilates a bit boring.
God, she's really into it. She's into extreme stuff. James, I imagine as an ex-postman who drinks Yorkshire tea, you work out quite regularly.
I mean, I play football and yoga's... I mean, I had an injury and I was recommended to do some yoga because it's good for stretching and things. So, I mean, I do see rehabilitation, it can be quite good.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
I mean, this is something that the council's paying for. I can see why people who are giving those classes may want a pay rise after 10 years of
and aerobics
not getting one.
for older people or whatever, or for children, is really good. It's good to keep people moving and stuff.
Really getting it together, you aren't you?
I am.
Mackerel woman. Thank you very much indeed.